All right, here's a little bit of a story. Um, Quite a few years ago, I think, maybe like 6, 7 years ago, when I was in my last year of college, Edward and I, and you might know Edward from the Officially Casually show, um, we went to a startup incubator um, in which basically this select group of people was going to take a type of course or like an accelerated um, path or guided journey from developing a business idea to starting a business. Um, and so at the time, we were kind of like in this mode of, work hard and play harder and all these kind of things. And we were listening to all these books and all these like self-help talks and books and resources and all these things. So we were kind of like diving like head into sort of like that environment. And that environment also reflected the environment of the people that seemed to be with us during this project or this course. Um, and this lasted for, I think, maybe like 2 or 3 months. We didn't make it all the way through. I think one of the main things is that we struggled in convincing other people that the things that we wanted to do were cool or interesting enough. Um, and I think in part, to be fair, um, I think some of the things that we were trying to get into um, were not probably in the range in the area of interest of the people. Some of the people that were there, when you, in the same way that not everyone's interested in sports or certain sports and that kind of stuff or certain hobbies, then maybe that's why those people kind of like weren't interested in those ideas as much. Or didn't see them, I guess, the way that we did, which is also like a very fair sort of like understanding. Um, and so at some point we just got sort of like kicked out of the program, and I think since then, I think one of the main things, or one of the I guess like the pieces of which I'm most grateful for that experience is that I think us like diving into that type of sort of like mindset and that type of environment and that type of culture head in, and then realizing that it wasn't really our thing. Like if we would have done really well, I don't know that we would have done really well. Like maybe we would have made like a really successful company or whatever, but I don't think we would have been surrounded by the people and by the environment that we want to be surrounded in. Some time ago, I remember I was watching a really amazing talk, and the speaker was saying how she, from her eyes, she did all the things right. She had a pretty successful. I think she had like a podcast or something like that. She had some venue. She was creating some kind of content. So I don't know if it was like a podcast or videos on YouTube or whatever it was. But then she also had a website and a blog, I believe. And she had these things that were attracting a lot of attention and a lot of viewers. And so then she started working on what are the demographics, who are these viewers, what do these viewers want, and she started like figure out all these things that you're supposed to do when you're starting a company. And eventually when she got it all figured out, she just dropped it. She just dropped everything. And what she was saying during the presentation is that in retrospect, what she realized was that it became it lost kind of like the point that instead of her creating things that she wanted and that she enjoyed, she was doing it sort of for she went to a point in which it was for the numbers and not for um, for the doing, I guess, so to speak. So I think going back to kind of like the biggest lesson from going to that is that by diving in head first into that and then being out of it, like I feel like and I can appreciate that sentiment way more. That maybe we would benefit a lot more from creating um, things that might evolve into companies by just doing the things that we enjoy doing and the things that we want to do, and those things will grow as they grow and as they need to grow. Um, but maybe by putting so much pressure into how the end result needs to be, um, we're in a sense hindering the actual potential of it. That maybe even though we think we're aiming high, we are going in a direction that is not the best, and that it could go so much more like further. That maybe we're looking at making a lot of money, but actually, if we were to do it the way that we actually wanted to do it, we would not make as much money, but we would make connections that would last a lifetime, and that there would be connections that would align even better to us, as opposed to it being more centered on the economic growth and all those kind of things. So there's so many ways in which it can go. And then one of the other things from back when we were doing that course or that when we were participating in that incubator is that there was something that Edward and I had been talking about for a long time, for like probably since we were kids. And it was that we wanted to make a company that people would actually enjoy working for. So the way in which I put it into words now is that if you were to ask, if I, as kind of like the owner of the company or the person running the company, were to ask anyone who's working there or participating there or in somehow involved in the company, where would you be if you could be anywhere? Like, if you could be anywhere right now instead of participating in this endeavor, where would you be that people would feel very comfortable saying here? That it would be such an environment, such a place to be, that they would actually like enjoy being there. That it would be a place that actually gave, you know, I don't know, purpose or whatever it is that it is that we need from an environment for us to feel at home. And so during that time, like it definitely felt like we didn't have that part figured out. And even now, many years later, I feel like I still don't have it figured out. But I think our mindset is sort of in a position in which we understand that maybe we don't have to have it figured out. That it's more like that it's more like we need to sort of create an environment that fosters that and moves us in that direction. Because maybe what it comes down to, and maybe the way that we create companies like this, is not by making a company like this, but by creating sort of like an environment or a type of community, so that the environment essentially builds itself. I mentioned on one of the previous episodes that I work on this effort for a company there was a company I used to work for, and they had an effort to become like the most human company. And one of the biggest lessons that I learned from that was like, I think, pretty eye-opening for me, is that when you take something like that, when you take something of like creating the most human company, I have a very particular perspective on what that means. But something that I realized very quickly is that the people around me did not share that exact perspective. So the lesson was that that's fine. That everyone's gonna define in the same way that in everyone's life, everyone needs to find sort of like their own journey. That no two journeys are alike, and no two measures of success are the same. The same would apply to a company or an environment that really becomes like a truly human or a truly how can I put it, like a place where we can like truly connect to. And so in that sense, it seems to me, at least at this point, and I bet this idea is going to evolve with time and with experience, that it is that what we need to create is companies or environments in which people feel like they can be themselves, and that they can define where it is that they want to be and who it is that they want to be and how it is that they want to grow. That instead of work being a place where you go to develop yourself professionally, as opposed to developing sort of like your human self, that when you get to a job, you're sort of make this distinction in which you're not, it's almost as if you're not developing yourself, you're developing your professional self. Then maybe what we need to do is bridge that gap and make those two things the same thing. And I think it's also going to come down to how do we look at work? What does work mean? What does work imply? How do we measure it? How do we don't? How can we live without measuring it? And of course, maybe like more profound questions like, what is really like the purpose of work? Like, why have we created this environment in which work is such a critical part of life in this society? And is it truly taking us in a direction that aligns to where we want to be? Someone once asked me when I was working at that company if what we were doing was like how do they call it, work-life balance. If we were working on is work-life balance, and I told them no, because I feel like the term work-life balance does not reflect where it is that we want to be. That if you have to balance something else with your life, then what are you doing really? Like, so if we say that work and life are two different things, then I think we should really question then what work is and why work is not life. And if we can, and so for that reason, I feel like that perspective of work-life balance doesn't really, as much as we might work on it, I think the fundamental premise is flawed. So all in all, I feel like we're not too far from making a pretty big leap in a good direction in this topic. However, I don't think it's going to come from one person or a group of people or one company. I think it's going to be a combination of people building an environment in which even more people can kind of like chip in and sort of like continue to evolve the idea. Because I think it's not going to be a thing where we say, okay, you know what, this is the goal and this is where we're going to get to. I think it's going to be a sort of like an impossible goal in a sense, in which I don't think this is something that we want to get to a point in which we say, okay, now we're good. Because I think the further along we get into the road of developing environments or companies or however we want to put it, in which people feel like their true selves, the more that we're going to realize how much more there is to work on. So things that might seem like incredible improvements in today's standards, by the time we get there, I think we're going to just notice how much more there is for us to do, and how much more incredible like things we can achieve if we keep pushing. So I think this topic is definitely going to keep coming up for me, and I'm really intrigued to see how it evolves through the upcoming years, and just things that are showing up in general, and just seeming disillusions that people are having at work, and getting more outspoken about it, and so challenging the way in which we're doing things today. I'm really interested to see how things are going to play and how things are going to play out in the upcoming years.